I'm Josiah Barstead from New Covenant Academy, and I will be competing in poetry. We'll start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. This beloved poem was penned in 1957 by Theodore Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss. It is said that Geisel himself was the inspiration for the poem's main character, the Grinch. He looked in the mirror one day and saw a sour reflection. He began writing in hopes of rediscovering something about Christmas that had lost. Join me for the classic holiday poem with the genuine story of redemption, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss. Whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood on there Christmas Eve hating the Whos. He stared down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town, for he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they hanging their stockings, he'd snarl with a sneer, "Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here." Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming, "I must find a way to stop Christmas from coming." For tomorrow he knew all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys, and then oh the noise, oh the noise, oh the noise, 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 noise. Then the Who's young and old would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. They'd feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas singing, the more the Grinch thought, "I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 50 years now I've put up with this. I must stop this from coming." But how? He got an idea, an awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. "I know just what to do," the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and clucked with a great Grinchy trick with his coat and his hat. "I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer." The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer were scarce, there were none to be found. That did not stop the Grinch. "No," the Grinch simply said, "if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead." So he called his dog Max. Then he took some red thread and he began to tie a horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh. He hitched up old Max, and the Grinch said, "Giddy up," and the sleigh started down towards the homes where the Whos lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were dreaming, sweet dreams without care. And he came to the first little house on the square. "This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, emptied his bags in his fist, and he sat down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, well, so could the Grinch. So he got stuck only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out, but the fireplace flew, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first ones to go. Then he snarled and slunk with a smile so unpleasant. Around the whole room he took every present: pop guns, bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. The Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimney. Then he snuck to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took the last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. "And now," gleamed the Grinch, "I will stuff up the tree." And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. And he turned around fast and saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was no more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who got out of bed for a cold cup of water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, and I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child, then he patted her head, he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for the fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, that old liar. On their wells he left nothing but hooks and some wire. Then that one speck of food that he left in the house was the crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for other Who's mouses. And it was choir passed down, all the Who's still in bed, all the Who's still a snooze. When he packed up his sled, he packed up the presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and tinsel, the trimmings and trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-hoo to the Who's with his grinchy claws humming. They'll soon be finding out that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open for a moment or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo. That's a noise the Grinch I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand on his ear. And he did hear sound, rising over the snow, and it started in low, and it began to grow. And the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. He started down Whoville. The Grinch opened his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came, somehow or another, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his grinchy feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling. How could this be so? It came without ribbons, it came without tags, it came without stockings, boxes, or bags. And it puzzled for 3 hours till his puzzler was sore, and the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say, the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And at the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast, and he himself even carved the roast beast.